In the heart of Versailles, amidst the glittering hallways of power and the shadowed corners of intrigue, there lived a woman whose name would become etched in the annals of history. She was not born a queen, but her allure, intelligence, and power rivaled that of any monarch. Madame de Montespan, the Enchantress of Versailles, the Sun King's most influential mistress, a woman whose beauty captivated a king and whose mind charmed a court. This is the story of Madame de Montespan, the Shadow Queen of Versailles, whose legacy is as enduring as the magnificent palace she once roamed. She was born in October 1640 and was baptized at the Château of Lussac-le-Château, today's Vienne department, in the Nouvelle-Aquitaine region in France. Françoise, or more formally, Mademoiselle de Tonnay-Charente, possessed the blood of two of the oldest noble families of France through her parents, Gabriel de Rochechouart, the Duke of Mortemart, and the Prince of Tonnay-Charente, and Diane de Grandsaigne, a lady-in-waiting to Anne of Austria, Queen Consort of France. From her father, she inherited the famous Mortemart esprit. As a young girl, she often traveled with her mother between the family estates and the court at the Louvre in Paris. At the age of 12, she began her formal education at the convent of Saint-Marie at Saintes, where her sister Gabrielle had started hers almost a decade earlier. She was very religious and took communion once a week, a practice that she would continue as a young woman. At the age of 20, Françoise-Athénaïs became a maid of honor to the king's sister-in-law, Princess Henrietta, Duchess of Orléans, who was known at court by the traditional honorific of Madame. Later, because of the relationship between her mother and the Queen Dowager, Anne of Austria, Françoise-Athénaïs was appointed to be a lady-in-waiting to the king's wife, Maria Theresa of Spain. In January 1663, Françoise-Athénaïs married Louis-Henri de Pardaillan de Gondrin, Marquis of Montespan, who was 1 year her junior. Madame de Lafayette says in her Histoire de Madame Henriette d'Angleterre that Françoise-Athénaïs was in love with another young man, Louis de la Trémoille, who was the elder son and heir to the Duc de Noirmoutier. However, la Trémoille had to flee to Spain after a disastrous duel, and Françoise-Athénaïs was betrothed to Montespan. The wedding ceremony took place in a chapel at the Église Saint-Eustache, Paris. Françoise later recounted that as she had neglected to bring along the proper kneeling cushions for the ceremony, the couple had to kneel on dog cushions. She soon became pregnant with her first child, Christine. 2 weeks after her daughter's birth, she danced in a court ballet, and less than a year later, her second child was born. The couple lived in a small house close to the Louvre, which allowed Madame de Montespan to attend court and carry out her duties there as a lady-in-waiting to the Duchess of Orléans. She quickly established herself as the reigning beauty of the court. Beauty, however, was only one of Madame de Montespan's many charms. She was a cultured and amusing conversationalist who won the admiration of such literary figures as letter writer Madame de Sévigné and diarist Saint-Simon. In addition, she kept abreast of political events. This had the effect of making her even more appealing to men of intellect and power. She was courted by a number of suitors, including Louis de Bois de Frontenac and Charles-Auguste de la Fare. Madame de Montespan astounded the court by openly resenting the position of Queen Maria Theresa of Spain. The daughter of King Philippe IV of Spain and Elizabeth de France, the Queen's Spanish title before her marriage, was Infanta Maria Teresa de Austria. In France, she was known as Marie-Thérèse d'Autriche. A scandal arose when the Duchesse of Montausier, governess of the children of France and lady-in-waiting to the Queen, was accused of acting as a go-between in order to secure the governorship of the Dauphin for her husband, the Duke of Montausier. By 1666, Madame de Montespan was trying to take the place of Louis XIV as current mistress, Louise de la Vallière. Using her wit and charm, she sought to ingratiate herself with the king. She also became close to the Dauphin, whose affection for her never wavered. Even though Louise de la Vallière knew that Montespan was trying to conquer the king's heart and reportedly laughed at her miserable efforts, she definitely underestimated her new rival. Montespan cleverly cultivated friendships with both Louise and Queen Maria Theresa, and when both ladies were pregnant, Madame de Montespan was asked to help them entertain the king during private dinners. Soon they regretted their decision, for Montespan now cultivated an intimate relationship with the king. Madame de Montespan was also said to have seduced the king by dropping her towel obligingly when she spotted Louis spying on her while she showered. Shortly after, Louise's position was diminished to second place. To conceal his new relationship, the king placed the ladies in connected rooms so he could have access to both. Louise left court and joined a convent, perhaps through regret and religiosity, or because she had no other option. The spotlight belonged now to the 25-year-old Athénaïs de Montespan. She also became friends at court with another lady-in-waiting to the queen, Louise Boyer, the wife of Anne-Jules de Noailles. Montespan's youngest son, the Count of Toulouse, would later marry one of Boyer's granddaughters. The first of Madame de Montespan's 7 children with the king was born in 1669. The newborn child, a girl, is thought to have been named Louise Françoise. The upbringing of this first child was entrusted to one of Madame de Montespan's friends, Madame Scarron, the future Marquise de Maintenon. A son, Louis Auguste, was born in 1670. When the third child, Louis César, was born in 1672, a house was purchased for Scarron and the children on the Rue Vaugirard. In 1673, the couple's 3 living illegitimate children were legitimized by the king and given the royal surname of de Bourbon. The eldest, a son, Louis Auguste de Bourbon, became the Duc de Maine. The second child, a son, Louis César de Bourbon, became the Comte de Vexin. And the third, a daughter, Louise Françoise de Bourbon, became Mademoiselle de Nantes, and, in 1685, married the son of the head of the House of Condé, a cadet branch of the reigning House of Bourbon. As Madame de Montespan spent most of her time immersed in the social whirl of the court, the 3 had little contact with their busy mother, and spent most of their childhood with their governess, Madame Scarron. In 1674, an official separation with her husband was declared by the Procureur Général Achille de Harlay, assisted by 6 judges at the Châtelet. Due to her role in royal adultery, the Roman Catholic Church soon became her adversary. In 1675, the priest Lecuyer refused to give her absolution, which was necessary for her to take Easter Communion, a requisite for all Catholics. Father Lecuyer raged, "Is this the Madame that scandalizes all France? Go abandon your shocking life, and then come throw yourself at the feet of the ministers of Jesus Christ." The king appealed to the priest's superiors, but the church refused to yield to the king's demands. After a short separation, the king and Madame de Montespan resumed their relationship, resulting in the birth of 2 more children, Françoise Marie de Bourbon, Mademoiselle de Blois, in 1677, and Louis-Alexandre de Bourbon, Comte de Toulouse, in 1678. Both were to be legitimized in 1681. The Affaire des Poisons, which erupted in September 1677, was to be the beginning of the end of the reign of La Montespan. Suspicion that Madame de Montespan might be capable of murder or worse began when the king's eyes strayed to another beauty, the Duchess of Fontanges. Madame de Montespan's relegation to the position of superintendent of the queen's household as a result brought matters to a head. Before any further developments in her romance with the king could occur, Mademoiselle de Fontanges died in 1681. Many at the time suspected that she had been poisoned by her rival, although none could prove it. It is now believed that Mademoiselle de Fontanges died from natural causes. Long assumed to have been involved in the infamous Affaire des Poisons, Madame de Montespan has never been conclusively implicated. Gabriel Nicolas de la Reynie, Paris's first lieutenant general of police, and the chief judge of the court, before whom the famous poisoning cases were brought, heard testimony that placed Madame de Montespan's first visits to the so-called witch, Catherine Montvoisin, known as La Voisin, in 1665. According to this testimony, they repeatedly carried out rituals to create a special potion for the king. The witch and the Madame de Montespan would call on the devil and pray to him for the king's love. As a way to express her gratitude for her request, they sacrificed a newborn's life by slitting its throat with a knife. Next, the baby's body would be crushed, and the drained blood and mashed bones would be used in the mixture. Louis's food was tainted in this way for almost 13 years, until the witch was captured after a police investigation where they uncovered the remains of 2,500 infants in Lavoisien's garden. No evidence that the garden search ever actually happened has been found. In 1666, Madame de Montespan supposedly went so far as to allow a priest, Etienne Guibourg, to perform a black mass over her nude body in a blood-soaked ceremony, which also, allegedly, included infant sacrifice. Whatever the truth in these allegations, in July 1667, Madame de Montespan became the king's new mistress even though Louise de la Vallière was carrying his child, Louis de Bourbon, Comte de Vermandois. In addition to seeking Louise's love, some charged Madame de Montespan with also conspiring to kill him. But inconsistencies in this testimony suggest that the royal mistress was innocent of these charges. However, suspicion was thrown onto Madame de Montespan because the name of her maid, Mademoiselle Desoyer, was frequently mentioned in connection with La Voisin in the evidence brought before the Chambre Ardente. Indeed, if anyone was attempting to kill the king, it was more likely Claude de Vin Desoillet, who had an illegitimate child fathered but not publicly acknowledged by Louis. Presumably, the maid resented the loss of Louis's attention. Olympia Mancini, Countess of Soissons, herself a former mistress of the king and well-known intrigante, was also implicated in the conspiracy. From the end of 1680 onwards, Louvois, Jean-Baptiste Colbert, and Madame de Maintenon all helped to hush up the affair in order to prevent further scandal about the mother of the king's legitimized children. Concerning the king's need to avoid shocking scandal, Police Chief Lorraine said, "The enormity of their crimes proved their safeguard." In 1691, no longer in royal favor, Madame de Montespan retired to the Fille de Saint-Joseph convent in the Rue Saint-Dominique in Paris, with a pension of 500,000 francs. In gratitude for her departure, the king made her brother the Duc de Vivonne, a Marshal of France. Louis had previously made one of her sisters, Gabrielle, whose vows were only 4 years old, the abbess of the wealthy Fontevraud Abbey. Gabrielle was appointed abbess in 1670, and it is said that her beauty, wit, and knowledge surpassed Athénaïs' qualities. The king wanted her to stay for longer periods at court, but Gabrielle always declined and stayed only for very short times. In 1700, Madame de Montespan acquired the Château d'Oiron, thereby abandoning the hospice of Fontevraud from 1703, and moved there in 1704 after the death of her sister Gabrielle. In her long retirement, Madame de Montespan donated vast sums to hospitals and charities. She was also a generous patron of the arts and letters and befriended Corneille, Racine, and La Fontaine. The last years of Madame de Montespan's life were given up to a very severe penance. Real sorrow over her death was felt by her 3 youngest children. She died in 1707 at the age of almost 67 while taking the waters at Bourbon-l'Archambault in order to try to heal an illness. The king forbade her children to wear mourning for her. Athénaïs was considered astonishingly beautiful by the standards of her time. She had large blue eyes, long, thick, corn-colored hair that fell in curls about her shoulders, and a curvaceous, voluptuous body. She was droll, amusing, and used her considerable wit to mock others. She also had an extravagant and demanding nature and possessed enough charm to get what she wanted. She was expensive and glorious, like the Palace of Versailles itself. Her apartments were filled with pet animals and thousands of flowers, and she had a private gallery. Costly jewels were showered upon her, and she was highly discriminating regarding the quality of the gems, returning them if they did not meet her exacting standards. She was given the nickname Quanto, how much, in Italian. Her love for food and her numerous pregnancies caused her to gain weight in her late 30s. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the life of one of history's most enigmatic figures. As we bid adieu to Madame de Montespan, we leave behind the echoes of a past that continues to whisper its secrets through the halls of time.